In today's video, we're going to model this pen in high levels of detail, but just real quick, let me show you a demo of the detail. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we will get started. See you there. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing I want to go ahead and do is address the measurements, and I'm working in millimeters under metric because that's how I measure the pen. I'm going to go in and clear the scene. Then I'm going to bring in a circle, 16 verts, and I'm going to start with a 5 millimeter radius. This is going to be the opening of the pen, and now I just want to orient the pen because I want to work in front ortho mode. I want the pen to be elongated across that axis. So now I'm coming in, creating some loop cuts because I'm going to use these cuts as ways of shaping the primitive of the pen. Go to X-ray mode, select these verts, going to double it to 10 millimeters. And then right here in the middle, I'm just going to eyeball it in between, scale it up. And you'll see that we have the initial shape of the tip of the pen, at least the outside part of it. Save my file. Now that looks pretty good. The next thing I want to address is the proper thickness. So now I'm going to go into my modifiers, and I want to bring in a solidify modifier. And I also measured this with calipers, and I'm going to do negative 0.9 millimeters. Like that, and the reason why it's negative is because I'm adding the thickness internally. And now I'm going to make sure my normals are correct. They are, so we're good there. All right, so now let's turn it off for the time being so I can work. And let's go to vertex mode. I'm going to go to X-ray mode, grab these verts at the end, and I want to extrude these out because I'm now creating the shaft of the pen. So I'm extrude those out on the x-axis. And now I'm using the measure it tool because I actually measured a real pen to see how long it was in millimeters. So I'm basically using this as a guide. This measurement tool in Blender that comes with it is not something I'm very good with. I just recently started using it to do my measurements. I found it a little funky, but it does work. And I assume it's user error on my part, but you'll see I'll use this briefly to start measuring some of the main pieces of this. I don't use it to measure everything, but I get the main pieces together so the main proportions of the pen's accurate. So now we're going to start building out the piece of the pen where the clip is. It clips on your shirt. And I want to move my cursor to the selection I made around that circle because it's going to create my new mesh at that point. So now I grab that selection, made a duplicate, separated out as a new selection, and now from here it's a separate piece, but we can extrude with the same sizing as the previous selection. So now I bring it out, and yet again let me go down here to the measure tool as soon as I can find it. There it is. And I'm going to do the same thing. This is kind of how I'm using it currently. I'm just measuring out the total length that I need, and then I'm matching up my selection to that. Like I said, as I continue to use this tool, I'll get better at it and probably explain it to you all. But for now, I'm just kind of rolling with it. So now I've still got my selection here. And now I'm just going to use G because I don't need to extrude anymore. I'm just stretching out that extrusion, essentially. And then now what I want to do is come in here in the center part of this, create a loop cut. And then I want to scale it out because the shape of this pen has a piece like that where it just kind of tapers up and then it tapers back down. Next, I want to grab these edges here on the end. I want to duplicate it and then I want to crank it out as a separate object, because from there is going to be the clicker that goes on the very back tip of the pin that you depress to get the pin to come out of the shaft. So I'm just kind of doing the measurement tool again, getting the length that I want, and I'm going to extrude it out to that length. And once I do that, I'll add loop cuts in to denote the shape of it, at least from the side. So I'm going to go in X-ray mode, select these verts here at the end, which is essentially that loop, and then I'm going to use a size tool or scale tool and scale it down. And I'm just going to scale these down. Now, granted, I'm eyeballing this, but I think it's pretty accurate. So I want to grab this loop here, and I'm going to extrude and scale, and then I'm going to top it off with a grid fill. And now I want to grab this edge here, and I want to bevel it, just so when we run sub D, it's got a nice little rounded edge to it. Don't worry so much about long faces, because we can fix that later. I'm going to grab this edge here and do the same thing, put a bevel on it. That's going to restrict our sub D. Going to grab the inside, do the same thing. And like I said, in the final version of this, you can put loop cuts on the inside to restrict, but for right now, no need to worry about it. Going to do more bevels here. And now we have what looks like a pin. So I'm going to run level 2 sub D and shade smooth on all these pieces. And now we're almost there. We want to go ahead and give this piece some attention. So what I want to do is start making the clip. I'm going to add in another loop cut. I'm going to bevel it. And from there, it's just going to give me a grid in which I can extrude some mesh from to make the clip. So I'm on top ortho. Now I'm back on front ortho. I did an inset, and now I'm going to hold down the shift key, the control key, and then right click. And I'm using my cursor, as you see on the screen, as a place where the mesh extrudes out to. And it's just a nice little quick way of being able to get this to follow my movement without making a curve or anything like that. So now at the end of this, I'm going to inset that in, or excuse me, I didn't inset it, I scaled it in. And then I'm going to grab these faces up here at the top, and I want to create that bulb effect that you see on the top of the clip. And since we already have sub D on here, it's going to naturally round it. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it to make sure it looks accurate, or at least good enough. And now I'm going to use proportional editing and just kind of play with that whole area a little bit. And as you see, over a period of time, because I didn't want to bore you guys with me playing with this thing for like 2 minutes, so went ahead and fast forwarded a little bit, but you can see the shape we got out. Now we're going to grab these edges here, not all of them, and I'm going to tighten them up a little bit by using mean crease. What's nice about this method is it's non-destructive. I do the same thing with the bottom, but just different values. And just like that, we're done with that clip. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to carve in some detail on the inside of the clip. So I'm just going to select all these faces here. I want to extrude that selection outward. Going to inset it just a hair, and then I'm going to pull it out again. Now what I want to do is I want to grab that loop there. I want to dissolve it. And I want to select these faces. And from here, I want to extrude those outward. Because the little pin part with the ink in it, that little inner shaft that has an ink inside of it, is going to fit into here. And since that pin is clear, you'll be able to see some of this at the right angle and the right lighting. Just kind of cleaning this up in here just a tad before we go too far. And I'm just giving this some detail. Almost looks like earbuds. But I can assure you it's not. But you can make earbuds literally the same way as I'm doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab these edge loops in here. I'm just kind of tightening some things up. And let's add in some extra loop cuts here just so my faces aren't quite so long. Don't need to get crazy with it. And this is just going to keep us really nice, consistent, and dense enough geometry in our model. And just like that, that looks pretty good. So now, as you can see, this pen is taking shape. Let's go ahead and start playing with materials a little bit. So I'm going into look dev mode, and I'm looking at the section here where we made the clip. And what I want to do is I want to grab this edge right here, duplicate it, create a new selection, and then from here I'll create that inner shaft part of the pen where the actual ink is actually in that little shaft and comes out the tip. So I'm going here in front ortho, because as you guys know that watch my videos, I like to work in orthographic mode because you can guarantee it's flat and stuff, vertices are not going all over the place. So I'll bring this out like a big cylinder, but it's really a circle. And really what I'm trying to do now is just kind of scale this thing to the right length. And then I'm going to bring out a second portion of this. And then the third. And then it's that third piece, I'm going to scale it down to make the tip of the pen. And just to keep with good geometry practices, as I usually do in my videos, I like to extrude and size this in and grid fill it. So we have all quads. And you'll see this is flat, but we will address this here in a second. Next thing I want to do is I want to select this edge right here. And I want to bring it back a little bit just so that that tip seems a little bit longer than it would have if I had left that edge where it was. Now let's go ahead and look at the front, and I want to go into vertex edit mode. I want to select this one vertices here or vertex here. I want to create proportional editing, and then it's a matter of hitting the G key to move it and me sizing down the amount in which that thing gets moved to get that tip that was flat to kind of be bulbous a little bit on the end. And keep in mind, sub D is going to round it out so it won't be sharp looking like it looks right here. Now what I want to do is I want to create a test material because I want to be able to see through this thing. That's the only reason why I'm doing it. So we're not going to use this material here on the final product. I'm just basically creating a basic glass shader. So I'll crank the transmission all the way up, made the color white, crank down the roughness, and now I can actually see through it as if you know, it were kind of finished. Now I'm coming back here. I isolated that needle or that inner shaft, and I'm running my bevels around here before I sub D it. And because we have all these long faces, I also want to address that. So let's put in some loop cuts here. This will make the geometry more dense, makes it a little bit cleaner and easier to work with. Also will help with materials and that sort of thing. So right here in the back it's open because we had a circle, and now what I want to do is I want to extrude and size it in and then grid fill it. And then I want to grab that edge here for sub D, and I'll put a nice tight little bevel right here. Just like that. And now once I've done that, I want to bring in some support edge loops here in the edge, just so sub D doesn't act all funky back there at the back. I want to keep it fairly tight. And now I want to shade smooth it and level to sub D it. This also is a little bit too long, so I'm going to pull all of this back and make that tip a little shorter. And now to fill in that gap, I'm putting in some edge cuts here. And that's it. So far, this is looking really good. So far, you guys have done a great job. We don't have too much more of this model left to mess with. Right now, we're mainly focused on materials. So what I want to do is go ahead and click on the piece of the mesh that has a clip. I want to create a new material. And we're just giving it a name. You don't really have to, but in order to keep things nice and clean, you can. And what I want to do is I want to come in here and I open up a new window in my preview. So I've split it in half, and on the right hand side I've got the shader viewport. So now I got rid of the principal. I'm bringing in a glossy, and I'm bringing in a diffuse. And since we've got two of these different nodes here, now I need to connect them together with a mix shader. So I'll bring in a mix shader, connect it to the output, and then I'll take the diffuse, put it in the A socket, put the glossy in the B socket, and right now they're mixed 50-50 due to the factor. But first thing I want to do is I want to bring the glossy all the way up to white. That's going to give it that plastic sheen look. And now the diffuse is my color, so I'm bringing the diffuse all the way down to black with a roughness of 0. And then I'm cranking down my factor so it has more bias towards the black color. And then from there, I can play with the roughness of the glossy to get that plastic look. See how the light kind of hits it and diffuses across the top of it, and it looks very more plastically than metal or glass. That's a little trick to getting that shader. Now it looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. If you wanted to, you could do UV. You could UV unwrap it and put a texture on it for like the name of your pen or something. I'm not going to bother to do that in the video, but you can see how to do it. Now let's click on the clicker. And since we already created a material, I go in there and select the material I use on the piece connected to it. And we are done with that part. Give it a look. And it looks pretty tight. So now we're going to isolate the inner shaft. And what I'm doing is I'm segmenting out some pieces of this because I want to create the capsule of ink on the inside of the inner shaft. So I duplicate, separate selection. It's a new mesh. And I'm going in here, going to edit mode. And I want to scale it down so it's smaller, so that the diameter of it's smaller than that inner shaft. So it will fit on the inside, in other words. So now I'm going here and I'm selecting these edges on each side. I'm going to fill it. And now what I want to do is I want to create some edge loops here so we tighten up the structural integrity of the geometry here. And I'm going to shade smooth and level 2 sub D. So now I've got like a little piece in here that's ink. And if we notice, it's kind of small, but we'll address that here in a second. So now I'm going in outliner. I'm going to give this a name just so I know what my parts are. All right. So now let's go to render view and let's see what it looks like. Let me go in here and click the inner shaft and do a material for it as well. So now we can see it. We can see the ink on the inside. And if you notice, like I said, it's small, but we'll deal with it here. So I still got the inner shaft and it's plastic. So what I want to do this time is I want to leave my principle there. I want to bring in a glossy and bring in a mix shader. Mix shader goes to output. Principle goes into socket A. Glossy goes into socket B. I'm going to crank the glossy to white to give that plasticky sheen. I'm gonna crank down the roughness. I'm just eyeballing it, so don't be too scientific about it. And you'll see I go back and forth, just kind of playing so light nails it just right. And I'm gonna change the IOR for plastic to 1.460, which I would suggest doing because that is the index of refraction for plastic. And if you notice, I can't really see in it real good. Let me go ahead and give this a name for the ink. And I'm gonna do something similar. And the reason why I crank transmission up on the ink is I know in some of the pens when you hit it with the light, you can kind of see through the ink a little bit. Or if the ink has been used to a certain degree, you can see where it kind of fades off. You can see the light in it. So right now is the boring part. I'm just playing with values here. I'm biasing the mix shader towards the ink there, the ink color, I should say. So now what I want to do is I want to create the tip here. I'm gonna give this metal look. So I'm in X-ray mode and I grab all of these faces from the tip all the way to this edge here. And just so you don't have weird stuff when we do this assignment, I'm grabbing these extra faces around this rim here where the distance between those adjacent faces is fairly small. So in other words, it's like two sets of tight faces here. I guess I explained that right, what I'm trying to say. Maybe not. But if you look where that bevel is, I'm selecting one half of that bevel. Because it's got sub D on it, and when we do these materials like this, sometimes it won't go all the way to the edge of your selection. Sometimes it'll be less than that. That's because of the sub D, so I'm compensating for it. So now I'm creating a material for that metal. It's like aluminum, I guess, or stainless steel. I don't really know what those pens are made out of, but it looks like either aluminum or stainless steel. So I'm gonna mimic a material similar to that. And keep in mind, this shaft here, this inner shaft is one piece. But notice I'm able to give it two different materials. So the first material, the main material applied to it, is that plastic look. And then that small selection where the tip of it is, that's the one I'm applying the secondary material to, which is the metal. And like I said, this is kind of the boring part where you actually see me playing with values. So only reason why I'm leaving it in here, in case somebody's watching this video that's more new to Blender than not, you can kind of see my process of kind of nailing this down. And I noticed you guys did not see me put the lights in the scene. These are just test lights so I can see what I'm doing in render mode, because my world by default is very dark. All right, so what I want to do here is I'm going to duplicate that ink selection. And what this is this is the section of that inner shaft where we have previously used some ink. And you can see a little bit of the old ink, or that gel, or whatever that clear looking gel is, mixes with the ink that like keeps the ink from running out of the top up there. That's what this part is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what it's called, but I'm aware that you see it in a lot of these gel based ink pens. That's what we're making here. So we literally took the same mesh, duplicated it. I just went in, deleted the material, and I'm gonna create a new material for it. So with the original ink, I'm going into edit mode. I grab in X-ray mode, I grab those verts that make up that first part of that rim there, and then I'm dragging it with G along to the very edge there. So the ink fills most of the tube there. And then I'm adding in some loop cuts for structural integrity of that cylinder shape with sub D. And there you go. Now we got a pen that's primarily filled with ink. And if you guys can see that second part, which is a little browner, that's where the ink has been used in the pen. I hope that makes sense what I'm making here. So what I'm doing now is I'm adding two loop cuts to the outer shaft of the pen, and then I'm filling it with the number of cuts that I want. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bevel these. You'll see here in a second. And now I'm going to extrude these along normals, but I'm going to kind of suck it in and make like a grippy like shape into the plastic. Just imagine the plastic having like a molded grip shape to it where your thumb or your fingers can grip onto the pen to hold it. And there you go. So far this model's looking really, really good. We're almost there, guys. Okay, real quick, we're going to get rid of the test material that's on that outer shaft, and right now I'm making the actual shader or material for that outer shaft. So we're going to use the same kind of setup as we did before. We got a principal, we got a glossy. We bind them together with a mixed shader node, plug that into the output. And what you'll basically need to focus on here are my settings. So 1.46 for the IOR, crank the factor to have more bias towards the principal, or in, like say, if you use the diffuse into the diffuse, because that's where the color is going to come from. In this case, I chose white, and I use glossy for a white color most of the time because it gives it that plastic look. And then the amount of shininess that the plastic has is denoted by the roughness of the glossy. Also added in transmission to it principal. So yeah, that's looking pretty good there. Now for the fun part, we're going to make that spring because this pen is spring loaded. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring in an empty. I'm going to scale it down just only so I can see it. It doesn't change the way it works. And then right beside it, I want to bring in a circle. and I want to orient the circle to my view. So let's move it over. And I'm scaling it down only because that's roughly the diameter or that I want that spring to be. So now I'm going to go into my modifier stack and I'm going to add in a screw modifier. I'm going to select the empty as the object that the axis is going to be on. I'm going to change my iterations, like the number of springs that it makes off this one. It's kind of like an array, I guess, if you will. And then I adjust the size of it. So now we got that. I converted it to a mesh by applying the modifier. I'm gonna level to it, shade smooth it, rotate it, and now I can just go into edit mode and scale it down till I get it inside of that pin, and it'll just look like it's part of the spring loading of the pin. Given that we're not having to make the pin functional in any kind of animation, it's fine to do this and stop right there with it. But what you're gonna see is I'm just kind of scaling it down a little bit in X-ray mode here and kind of trying to figure out how big the spring needs to be. And then keep in mind, while I'm recording this video, I'm actually looking at a pin in my hand too. Kind of the best form of reference is to have a physical thing in front of you. It's actually better in photos. So now what I wanted to do is come in here, and since I already have a material I think it'll work, I'll use the same one that I used for the tip. That metal look, that stainless steel aluminum look, and I apply it there. So now I go into render mode, and now we have a spring around the tip of the pin. So one thing I noticed after looking at the pin is that spring is way too small. The spring should go on the outside of that whole piece there. So we're going to edit mode. We're going to scale it up, and the top of that spring should touch the top and bottoms of the inner portion of the outer shaft. Because there's like a little retention clip that when you push it down and that little tip pops out of the end of the spring, end of the pin, there's a retention clip, looks like it's made out of plastic, that holds that spring in place. So I'm just getting the spring to where it looks like it should. Now, moving it into place, because you can see part of the tip there. And instead of like making another one of these and duplicating the object, I'm just going to use an array modifier. And then that'll allow me to arbitrarily go in there and duplicate it X number of times. So right now we've got it on factor of X, and because I'm working in front ortho, it makes this very easy. So I'm going to do it on a factor of Y, and there you are. So the spring problem is now fixed. Now that we're done with the spring, the next thing to do is the rubber grip that you primarily hold when you write with the pen. So I'm going to select the outer shaft and make a loop cut, bevel it to roughly the width in which I want to use for that piece of rubber. And then I'm moving it along the x-axis to get it positioned where I want it. About right there is fine. And from here, I'm going to go in and select that loop, and I want to bring it in to the left a little bit more, just to shorten it up just a little bit. Like I said, I didn't measure this part. I just mainly wanted to get the scale of the pen right. And the rest of it, I could just eyeball it because I'm not doing this for actual work. It's just for our YouTube video. So I'm not going to be as particular. So I select all these faces. I want to duplicate it, separate it out as a new selection. And if you notice how it looks weird there, that's because Blender's trying to figure out which thing to render, because they're literally taking up the same space. So those faces and those vertices are taking up the same space, and that's why it looks kind of funky there. So now bringing another loop cut, I'm going to select all these faces around here. And these faces I'm going to extrude out to give this a nice little lip at the bottom of it. And we still have sub D enabled where you can see it. So you'll see how it kind of curls up to that shape. Now bringing another loop cut back here, I'm going to do something similar, but not quite the same. So I'm going to extrude all these faces upward, and then I'm going to put a loop cut right in the center of them, and then I'm going to scale it up to give it a nice rounded look. Basically a nice rounded bevel right there at the other side of it. And then the way you get it to be pronounced is you grab that loop cut to the furthermost left and you bevel it. Like I'm doing here. And when I pull out of that, now you can see. All right, so now it looks a little muddy up there with the first piece we did. So I'm going to grab that loop cut there, that edge loop, and I'm going to, instead of beveling it, I'm going to do a mean crease on it. Keep it real subtle, and that looks like I want it. All right, just kind of looking over some stuff here. All right. So now it's still too small. Let's deal with that Z index issue that you see here. See how it looks all crunchy and weird? That's why. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this up just a bit. Doesn't need to be much. It just needs to be slightly higher than that outer surface, and then that disappears, as you see right here. So now we're good with that, and I'm going to apply the scale. And just to make sure, I didn't think I'd change any rotation, but I'll just do scale, reset scale and rotation. Now what I want to do is come in here and give this a material. So I want it to be black so it matches my pen. You can change this color to whatever. I'm going to bring in a glossy, and because this is a more like a rubber material, I'm still going to use the same setup as I did for the other two. It's just going to be slightly different. So yeah, I bring in the glossy. And then I crank the roughness up just a little bit more. And I'm going to bias the factor towards the principal. So in other words, it's going to be more black in this case. And I'm just going to play with the roughness until I get that sheen kind of like I want it. And I'm going to crank up the roughness in the principal too. You make it look a little bit more like rubber. Now I could give it texture and that sort of thing, but in this case, you're not going to notice it. So now what I want to do is bring in a loop cut here. Place it right here. I'm going to bring in another one because I'm establishing my boundary. And then I'm going to fill in the middle with loop cuts. Well, right now I'm just kind of changing the shape of this a little bit right there in the center. So now I'm going to go back in there within my boundary, and I'm going to put in a few loop cuts in there. And we're going to create that grippy effect like we did on the plastic part of the pen. Let's zoom in so we can get a better look. And let's go to face edit mode or face selection mode. Go to X-ray mode so it grabs everything on both sides. And I'm going to grab that set of faces, these set of faces, and I'm going to extrude along normals. And I'm being real subtle. And that looks pretty good, but it still looks a little muddy. So I'm going to grab this edge loop here, this edge loop here, this one here, and that one there. And then I'm going to go in and do a mean crease and be real subtle with it, because I don't want to look like a hard cut there. I don't want to look like a hard, sharp crease. So I'm just kind of playing with it, be real subtle. I'm holding down the shift key so it doesn't overshoot my landing. And to me, that looks pretty decent there. So good job on this pen. We're there. There's only one last piece of this model to make, and that is that retention clip I was talking about. So let's go ahead and right here in the outer portion of the shaft, let's create a loop cut. Let's bevel it because it's roughly a cylindrical shape like this. And let's separate it out by duplicating it. And now it's the same size. So now we got to go to edit mode and make it a little bit smaller so it's on the inside of that outer shaft. And I'm going to use extrude along normals to give it some thickness. I'm going to do shift in to make sure we recalculate the normals so we don't get backwards normals. And now I'm going to go to edit mode. I'm going to select the edges of this shape and I want to give them a bevel. So with sub D, we don't get any funkiness. . 'Cause And that looks pretty good. And what I want to do just for structural integrity, I want to give a edge loop right here on the outside of this and on the inside. And that ought to hold up really, really well. So now I'm going to give this a name. And if you notice, I got a little lazy in this one, didn't give a lot of stuff names, but the pen is solid. It's built right. I'm going to go in here and give it a material. Give it that nice shiny black plastic like we did where the clip is. And now we are done. In order to shorten this video a little bit, I made sure not to show too much stuff. So we're done modeling the pen. It's solid. So what I'm doing now is bringing in a ground plane. I brought in a back plane, which I ended up turning into a sphere, and I encapsulated the whole scene in the sphere and then gave it some emission so it lights the pen from every angle. And now I'm going to go in here in this ground plane, which you can look at like a table that the pen is sitting on. And I'm going to go into edit mode, subdivide it a bunch of times. And then from there, I can unwrap it and then put a texture on it, like wood or whatever. And in the case that I ended up doing, I did a PBR on it. And there you have it, guys. The finished product, the rendered pen. If you like this video and like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe for more, and we will see you on the next one. Take care, guys, and great work as always.